Written and directed by Brandon Cronenberg, son of body horror legend David Cronenberg, Possessor is a movie that proves despite having an already established parent within the industry, name alone isn't enough to guarantee you success. However, skill and respect for the art is, something which this movie happens to be oozing with. 2020's Possessor isn't even Brandon's first foray into the world himself, as back in 2012 he created the strange, yet genuinely interesting Antiviral, and recently he's perhaps best known for his 2023 release Infinity Pool, a movie that's been on my radar for quite some time that I've yet to get to due to my love of bodies of water and the never-ending concept of time. This movie immediately beginning with an accurate representation of what the world is going to look like in a few years when everyone has a Neuralink installed in their brain. We see a woman putting her head on charge. We learn that it's a woman named Holly who's attending a party, but after arriving she proceeds to get all touchy-feely with the cutlery for some reason. They have a name for people like that. Strange. She admires them so much that she thinks someone else should get a closer look at them too, so close that it ends up inside their body on accident as she walks up to a man and stabs him through the neck, directly in front of everyone. After he falls to the ground, she proceeds to repeatedly thrust it into him until he eventually stops moving, in the process making a really big mess that now someone is going to have to clean up. She then appears to ask someone to be pulled out, about 20-something years too late, before being shot dead by the police after drawing a weapon on them. We then see that Holly is actually a transracial white woman who's then brought out of a machine. It turns out that it wasn't actually someone in blackface, and instead an assassin named Tacia Voss, whose job it is to connect to different hosts to conduct assassination missions, before ensuring that the host is also killed to permanently sever the connection. After returning to her real body, after a hard day's work of framing a black person for murder, real classy, she's forced to perform a psychic evaluation to ensure that there's no issues. You know, apart from the whole homicidal maniac thing. Because much like working in any other corporate job, it slowly but surely destroys your brain over time. Something that Tacia has actually been suffering from due to her time connecting to different hosts over the years, and something that she's deliberately hiding from her employers because having a broken brain is actually quite fun. So after another hard day at the office, she returns home to her husband and child, where we learn that this movie takes place in an alternate 2008. But in this 2008, instead of a financial crisis ruining everyone's income, they have murderous white women with brain disorders. Tacia is told that her next host is a man named Colin Tate, an ex-dealer but still current user. Her target will be Colin's girlfriend Ava, and her powerful father named John Pass, a CEO of a company named Zoo-Through. The hit has been placed by John's stepson Reed, who after this unfortunate tragedy will be next in line to inherit John's fortune and position in the company. Colin is seen as the perfect candidate for the job, as he already has a history of substance abuse and being unstable, so it isn't so unlikely to see that one day he could snap, kill his girlfriend, and her horrible father in a drug-induced fit of rage. Colin is kidnapped and an implant is placed into his brain, which Tacia will then be able to transfer into. And as the process begins, she feels her body melt away as she's transferred into Colin's, in a surreal transition which involves her body quite literally melting away. One of the first instances of truly strange yet beautiful effects used throughout the movie, effects which rely as much as possible on the practical aspects in order to perfectly convey that truly unsettling feeling that only a physical tangible object is currently capable of doing. Tacia then wakes up as Colin and proceeds to immediately look at the cuck chair in the corner of the room.
I don't know what this is, but it's kind of hot.
After waking up as a man and finally discovering that men do indeed have it worse than women due to having sperm cramps, she begins to live undercover as him with his girlfriend Ava. But it isn't long before this woman knocking around in a man's brain begins to see things which aren't actually there. Visual glitches, disturbances in the connection. She sees a vibrating, floating particle that doesn't seem to be obeying the laws of physics, which disappears as soon as she touches it. Something which has similarly happened to me with the friends I've made in my head. As Colin, she goes to work at his job at Zoo-Through, a job which involves wearing a virtual reality headset to simulate being inside of an actual office instead of a dark room, where he then looks through people's unsecured cameras to take note of the curtains that they have in their house. Extremely important information. Information that somehow isn't possible to be automated, despite living in a world where they have the technology to put someone's consciousness into someone else's body. Being in a simulation while being in a simulation proves to be a bit too much for Tacia, as she takes off the headset to once again see the floating speck. But this time after touching it, she then feels immense pain due to eating dairy that morning before beginning to hallucinate herself with a scarred and morphed face while looking into the mirror as Colin. Information that Tacia is deliberately keeping from her employers, despite them repeatedly asking her if she's experiencing any issues. But believing that mental instability is for wusses, she doesn't tell anyone and returns home as Colin to find his girlfriend Ava and their friends engaging in the rather strange pastime of sniffing salt off glass picture frames. After sleeping with Ava as Colin while actually being Tacia, Tacia's mind begins to slip back and forth between her body with Colin's penis and Colin's body with Colin's penis. The next day as Colin, she attends the dinner party where she's tasked with carrying out the assassinations. A dinner party being held at Ava's father's house, John Pass, who's played by Sean Bean. John, being a person who was incredibly rude to Colin for simply being unlucky enough to exist in his close proximity, unknowingly to him, helping to create the backstory behind his impending death. As Colin, Tacia is then publicly thrown out of the party in order to create a believable motive to come back later and start the killing by drunkenly walking up to John before getting a little bit physical, which results in him being physically removed himself. And sometime later, Tacia returns to John's home with a gun, but notices a fire poker and thinks perhaps that would be a lot more fun to use instead. Something which Tacia actually went against her orders with and did in her last job, as with the assassination at the beginning of the movie while as Holly, where she attempted to butter some bread except in some guy's neck. There too, she was supposed to use a gun. After walking up to a drunk John, Tacia begins to violently beat John before thrusting the fire poker into his mouth and twisting it as she pushes it in further. Ava then walks into the room mid-daddy bashing session and is immediately shot in the back as she attempts to flee. And despite being sent here with a clear job, kill both of them and kill them efficiently, Tacia proceeds to take her time and derive some sort of pleasure out of using the fire poker to tear out some of John's teeth before popping one of his eyeballs out of its socket, to finishing off Ava as she attempts to get back to her feet and escape. Tacia is then supposed to use the gun to kill Colin and complete the mission, but unfortunately he can't deep throat to save his life and keeps taking the gun out of his mouth. Tacia then begins hallucinating again, this time seeing a visual representation of their connection slowly degrading as their faces are fused together but begin grotesquely separating. Still in Colin's body, her own body then begins to vomit blood as the implant begins to damage her personal brain. Tacia's employers, who are monitoring her condition, learn that she's still inside of Colin, but he is also now in there too. And from this point in, it isn't exactly apparent who's in control at any given moment, with the most likely answer being a bit of both of them is continually in control, as their consciousnesses then begin to morph. With pieces of Tacia and both Colin shining through, they then show up at one of Ava's friend's house, a person named Rita, who Colin has also been seeing simultaneously while seeing Ava. For some completely unknown reason, other than I guess they aren't exactly too fond of women, they shoot Rita as she showers, before they discover that despite suffering serious brain trauma and losing an eye, John has actually survived the vicious attack due to Tacia not using the gun like she was supposed to do, because Tacia doesn't like being told what to do. Colin's friend Eddie then shows up at Rita's apartment and immediately shoots him with a device that knocks him unconscious. He explains that he actually works for Tacia's employers and he was an undercover plant in Colin's life, and now he's here to temporarily repress Colin's consciousness so that Tacia could finish off the job in a believable way that can still be salvaged. But while Eddie is conducting the work on their brain, Tacia then feels herself being choked out by Colin before he uses his bare hands to crush her skull, remove her face, and wear it himself. A visual representation of Colin fighting back to regain more control of his body, but not entirely, because once you've got an annoying woman in your ear, you can never get rid of her. Colin wakes up horrified to discover Eddie and Rita are shot dead, and confused, yet still having access to part of Tacia, shows up at the home of her husband Michael and son Ivor in an attempt to actually try and find Tacia. He points a gun at Michael and begins demanding to know where she is, information that Michael doesn't even seem to know, because I guess she just kinda does whatever she wants to do. Colin is threatening to shoot Michael in order to make Tacia subconsciously appear, but when she does appear to him, she doesn't do what you would expect her to do and begin pleading with the man holding the gun to her husband's head, but instead begins blaming Colin for all of this and gaslighting him by telling him that he's actually been in control this entire time. Tacia then actually seems to regain control of the body just as Michael suddenly fights back, and despite now being Tacia in control, she proceeds to slice his finger off before he can shoot Colin's body, before hacking him to death while inhabiting another man's body. While Tacia is having the most fun with her husband that she's had in decades, Ivor then stabs Colin in the neck, resulting in Tacia turning around and repeatedly firing into her own son. I brought you into this world, I can take you out. Colin's body then bleeds out, as we see that Tacia's boss was actually the one in control of Ivor. They both then wake up back in their own bodies, completely unfazed about any of the completely insane family activities that have just unfolded, as Tacia appears to have actually been given what she wants: freedom away from her boring husband and annoying kid.
So before this video comes to an end, I'd like to just give a big shout out and a massive thank you to all of the YouTube members and patrons, the people who every month continue to go out of their way to help support the channel. If you're interested in becoming a YouTube member or patron yourself, not only are you just generally being a great support, but you also get access to a few little perks, like being able to join the private Discord server, where you can then get links to all uncensored versions of videos. And starting off with this week's new YouTube signups, a massive thank you to Jacob Wilburn, Brandon, Riley Jane, Luca Guarnieri, Mohammed Amin, Lucidity, Jasper Nortman, Henry Garies, Ian English, Machine Slug, Danga1999, Saucer, Rebecca Rodriguez, Steph G, The Soldier 420, B-Boy York, Toulouse Castle, Jake Slyford, The La Yared 1, Anumpum Mahendale, Cameron Kelly, Zintel McQuaba, Young Yokai, Caitlin Dexter, Steve Papania, Rowan Parkhurst, Aman Khatib, Ductal, Blue Templex, McMonster Gaming, Bradley Deem, Giant Mutant Ant, Eli Economy Estimated, Jerushal Gamboa, Amelia, Ed, Sungamp Fandavarian, The Last Final Girl on the Left, Thiago Uriarte, Jolly Good Day, Hestia, Paceo2, Hossam Eldin El Sheriff, Delusional MF, and Clognut. Now moving over to this week's new Patreon signups, a massive thank you to Cupid Stunts, Sean Thompson, Ahmed Abdullah, Bailey K, Owen Gilpin, NK, Jenna Peterson, Lani Yash, Jasper Nortman, Swank Tussie Wussy, Bethany Richard, The Xyz, Craig O'Toole, Andrew Arnold, Craig Young, Gert Boy, Robin, Reactorholic, Jeffrey Wiggins, Ollie Lambert, Johnny Musternan, Emily Creek, Devon Rutledge, Beak Adam, Michael French, Placeborg, Isaac Ramirez, Michael, Constance Guin, Cream Puff, Biz6455, Adam F, Geron, By the Way I'm a Mermaid, Conrad Cuck, Lithron, Georgia Dim, Mitch W, Galaxy Ruditon, Hungsky AZ, Adam Keelan, X Neon, Elo Queens, Jallo B, Ania, Ouija Ramirez, Alexander Vodopian, and Damian Hutchinson. So once again, a massive shout out to all of the YouTube members and patrons, and a big thank you to everyone else for watching.